Hello and welcome to Stories Behind the Songs. My name is Jim Tompkins, and in each episode I tell the backstory behind a great rock or pop song. Today's song is Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. Silver Springs is a song written by Stevie Nicks and intended for the 1977 classic album Rumors. Interestingly, it never made it onto that album, and it wound up taking a very long and circuitous route to fame. In this video, I'll dig into why that was and what exactly the song is about. So let's jump in and explore this great song. Silver Springs was written in 1976 as Fleetwood Mac was working on the album which would turn out to be Rumors, which was the second Fleetwood Mac album to feature she and Lindsey Buckingham. Prior to this huge moment in music history, Fleetwood Mac had been on a long and topsy-turvy quest for success and stardom. The band is formed in 1967 by Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer, and drummer Mick Fleetwood. Initially, they had a good deal of success in the UK with several hit songs, including a #1 song called Albatross. But that success did not translate across the pond to the US. Almost from the start, the band is a constantly shifting lineup. In the early 70s, Peter Green leaves the band and they have a rotating cast of frontmen/lead singers, including Jeremy Spencer, Bob Weston, and Bob Welch. Eventually, Mick Fleetwood decides if they're going to have any chance of success in the US market, they have to relocate the band to LA to be closer to their record label. They do this in 1974, but by this time the band is really burnt out. They'd released 9 studio albums, but they just couldn't break through in the American market. They are churning through lead singers like crazy. They have no idea who their future frontman and guitarist is going to be, and they are at an all-time low point. It's New Year's Eve in 1974. Mick Fleetwood is visiting Sound City Studios in LA, and he's getting a tour from the house engineer Keith Olsen. Keith plays him a track he'd recorded with a duo called Buckingham Nicks. At that very moment, Lindsey Buckingham happens to be in the studio. He's walking down the hall when he sees a very tall, bearded man listening to his song Frozen Love. He and Keith Olsen have it cranked way up, and the tall guy seems to be really grooving to the record. Keith Olsen introduces Mick Fleetwood to Lindsey Buckingham, and by doing so, he basically shifts the fabric of rock history. An introduction that would lead to the band selling nearly 100 million albums worldwide. They must have hit it off quite well because almost instantly, Fleetwood Mac asks Lindsey Buckingham to join the band as their new guitarist and singer, without even auditioning him. But it wouldn't be that simple because of the other part of the equation, which is Stevie Nicks. It turns out Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham have their own long and twisted history. They first met in high school at a party where Lindsey is strumming a guitar and singing California Dreamin' by the Mamas and Papas. Stevie sits down next to him and joins in on harmony. "I just threw in my Michelle Phillips harmony and he was so beautiful," she said in an interview. A few years later, after high school, Lindsey recruits Stevie into a band he's joined called Fritz. The band has some success, but in a few years they break up and Lindsey and Stevie form a duo. Their efforts culminate in the release of their debut album titled Buckingham Nicks in 1973. But just like Fleetwood Mac, Buckingham and Nicks in 1974 are near the end of their rope. They'd gotten involved romantically, but were on the verge of breaking up. And the album they released, which is an excellent album, commercially is a big flop and they are dropped from their record label almost immediately. On New Year's Eve, when Lindsey meets Mick Fleetwood, Stevie's working as a waitress to pay their rent, and about a moment away from packing up, walking away from Lindsey, LA, and the music business, and heading back to Arizona. After getting the offer to join Fleetwood Mac, Stevie and Lindsey talk it over for a few days. Lindsey's not sure about joining. He's still invested in the Buckingham Nicks success. But Stevie convinces him he should, and not only that, but they should both join Fleetwood Mac. So Lindsey goes back to the band and tells them he's in, but he and Stevie are a package. It's both of us or none of us. The band doesn't want to do this, but they weren't in much of a bargaining position, so they agree. In 1975, this new configuration of Fleetwood Mac releases a self-titled album, and that album breaks them big. The album goes to #1 on the Billboard charts and has 3 top 20 singles, including 2, Rhiannon and Say You Love Me, that just miss out on cracking the top 10. All of a sudden, after so many years of struggle, Fleetwood Mac is huge. The following year, though, is one of highs and lows and a lot of insanity. They have the gratification of finally hitting it big after all those years of struggling. The money's flowing in, the concerts are selling out, the fame is there. But at the same time, personally, they are a total mess. John and Christine McVie, who had married in 1970, have recently broken up. Lindsey and Stevie are in the process of breaking up. Even Mick Fleetwood goes through turmoil as his wife has an affair with former Fleetwood Mac frontman Bob Weston. All this is happening at the same time they finally make it big. In early 1976, they begin the process of recording the next album in Sausalito, California. Despite all the personal problems and animosity, the songs are brilliant. And most of the songs are about the personal situations they're in at that very moment with each other. They are essentially venting their feelings through the music. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham in particular are working through the anger and hurt of their breakup. Buckingham wrote Secondhand News, Never Going Back Again, and Go Your Own Way about Nicks, who responded with Dreams and Silver Springs, which are all about her relationship with Lindsey. She writes Silver Springs as a symbolic thing of what Lindsey could have been to her. She gets the name and idea as they drive under a freeway sign in Maryland that says Silver Springs. She thinks that it sounds like a nice town and imagines the happy version of what could have been between she and Lindsey. When Lindsey wrote some pretty hurtful lyrics to her in Go Your Own Way, she then wants this song to be her stamp on history. A song he'd have to listen to over and over again that would haunt him and force him to sing in concert.
So I begin not to love you. Turn around, see me run. I say I loved you years ago. Tell myself you never loved me. No, don't say.
The finished album winds up with 11 songs, and in musical parlance, it has no fillers. Every single song is worthy of being released as a single in its own right. That had made it really hard to decide which songs to include and which not to include. Prior to digital music, with a vinyl record, you could only fit about 45 minutes of music onto the two sides of an album. They have 3 songwriters, Lindsey, Stevie, and Christine McVie, with a lot of material. This means some songs ain't making the cut. The album's nearly finished, and Mick Fleetwood comes to Stevie Nicks and says, Stevie, I need you to come outside to the parking lot because I need to talk to you for a minute. She knows it's serious because he never asks anyone to come out to the parking lot to talk about anything. As Stevie Nicks said, so we walked to the huge record plant parking lot and he said, I'm taking Silver Springs off the record. And of course, my first reaction was, why? And he said, there's a lot of reasons, but because basically it's just too long. And we think that there's another of your songs that's better, so that's what we want to do. Before I started to get upset about Silver Springs, I said, what other song? And he said, a song called I Don't Want to Know. And I said, but I don't want that song on this record. And he said, well, then don't sing it. I started to scream bloody murder and probably said every horribly mean thing that you could possibly say to another human being, and walked back in the studio completely flipped out, she said. Silver Springs gets delegated to be the B-side of all songs, Go Your Own Way, which was Lindsey's angry diatribe about Stevie. So it's like a double stab in the back. And that's the point where the song starts its fade into history. As the B-side to Go Your Own Way, it doesn't get much airplay. It never made it onto any other Fleetwood Mac album, never made it on any of Fleetwood Mac's live set lists. As far as I can tell, it was performed live only a handful of times in the late 1970s. Stevie herself has said she assumed the song was history, never to be performed again and never to be heard. That would possibly have been the case, except for what happens in 1997. In 1997, Fleetwood Mac hasn't released an album of original material featuring both Lindsey and Stevie in 10 years. Lindsey had left the band in 1987 and Stevie in 1991, and Mick Fleetwood had completely disbanded the whole operation in 1995. However, the individual members keep working with each other on side projects, and that leads to a full-bore reunion of the classic lineup of Mick Fleetwood, John and Christine McVie, Lindsey and Stevie. In 1997, they plan a new tour which will be called The Dance. And as part of that, they will do a special concert that will be filmed and aired on MTV at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California. For this tour, Silver Springs is added to the playlist. So they rehearse it and start performing it during the tour, and then the band has the special concert for MTV. In the rehearsals and performances of Silver Springs leading up to this, Stevie is holding something back. She's saving herself. And when they hold the Warner Brothers concert for MTV on May 22, 1997, she takes the performance of Silver Springs to another level. The intensity between she and Lindsey Buckingham is unreal. The song builds up to the crescendo chorus at the end, where she turns to Lindsey and sings directly to him. And Lindsey and she are basically staring each other down. You can feel the love, the anger, the history between them. To me, it seems like they are oblivious to the crowd and the other band members.
Blue-green colors flashing.
When this concert is aired on MTV, the song takes off. It starts getting airplay. Most people had never heard the song before, myself included. I remember thinking, where's that song from? I went back through the albums but couldn't find it. This song that was cut from Rumors 2 decades prior enters the charts and becomes a top 40 hit, rising all the way to number 5 on Billboard's Adult Contemporary chart. And not only that, it's nominated for a Grammy Award in 1998. As producer Richard Dashit said, Silver Springs was the best song to never make it onto an album. Silver Springs would be included on the 2005 remaster of the Rumors album, finding its place on that classic album after all those years. And from that point on, the song becomes a staple of Fleetwood Mac's live performances, and Stevie and Silver Springs finally get their due. Silver Springs is now considered as one of the great all-time Fleetwood Mac songs, and a time capsule to the relationship she had with Lindsey, as well as the relationship she could have had with him. That wraps up the story behind the song Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel by clicking on that little red icon in the corner. And I'll be back soon with another story behind a great rock and roll song.